what I'm doing is making maple syrup. It's an activity that happens in the spring, just as the snow starts to melt and as the temperature is right around 0 Celsius. The sap goes from the ground up into the tree, so we drill a hole into this tree, put a tap in with hang a bucket on it, and this, when the weather is right and the conditions are right, the sun's shining, the sap, which looks a lot like water, will come out, drip into the can, and we take it back to the camp, or to, in this case, to my homemade on my front porch, and boil it, evaporate the water until you get down to the consistency of maple syrup. In this area, it runs anywhere from 30 to 40 to 1, so it may take 40 gallons of sap or 30 liters of sap to make 1 liter of syrup. And it's not a matter of cooking it as much a matter of evaporating the extra water off and bringing down the concentration of the nutrients in the sap down to consistency, which is maple syrup, which is stuff we pour on our pancakes, and I can give you lots of recipes to use maple syrup on. The production levels vary every year, and it's a matter of when you've tapped. If you tap too soon and the tree that starts to heal before the season really starts, you may not get as much sap. Once it starts getting, the temperatures get high up into the low 20s or high teens, the sap will actually start to spoil as the buds start to come out on the trees, and as the tree moved into springtime. It's not that it stops running, but it gets very strong, it gets milky, it makes very poor quality syrup. So the old farmers call that the bud run. That's the stuff that they would maybe still make it. They'd clean out their pans and they'd maybe take it home and mix it up with the pig feed and feed it to the pigs if it wasn't, because it's nutrition. It's sweet. It's sugar. It's a very natural based sugar, and sugar from trees. Well, as you can see up here, I have a series of Coleman camp stoves. We call them propane stoves, and I have a series of pots and pans on them. Simply a matter of, you can do this in the house, where you can put it on the electric stove and fill your sap up and turn it on and boil it till it goes down, till it goes dry. But as a kid, I remember if you do that in the house and you don't have a very good ventilation system, and all the sticky water is running down the windows of the house and all down the walls, because that much turns the house into a steam bath, because it takes hours to evaporate all that water. So it's much better done outside. Even outside, I have to scrub the entire front porch down at the end of the year, because there'll be a sticky residue on everything, because the sap, as the water leaves, just leaves the sugar, and it's like having syrup all over the place. So I do it old school here, where I may have a cold bin and a rich bin. So every hour I'll come out and say, okay, they've all gone down maybe an inch, so I'll take a scoop out of the second one into the first one, and then 2 scoops out of the third one into the second one, and 3 scoops out of the fourth one and the third one, and so on, till when I get to the end pot where the freshest syrup is, or sap is, that the stuff that just put in last time, I can pull another whole 5-gallon pail or another 20 liters like this bucket into the new. So every hour I can evaporate about 20 liters of sap. To make 5 liters of syrup at a rate of about 30 to 1, so 30 times 5 is 150 liters. If I can evaporate 20 liters an hour, 7 to 8 hours of boiling in order to make 5 liters of syrup. What I do with it, well, because I use propane and it's more of a hobby than a business, I tend to give it away and make a lot of friends around town with it. Why do I like maple syrup? Definitely tradition brought on from my father. My father was born in the 1920s, in the Depression, where they simply didn't have, living on a farm that didn't have sweet. They would make syrup and they'd actually boil it further and actually make blocks of sugar and take a sharp knife and scrape it to make sugar so that they could make cakes. It was a staple. It was a homemade sugar. It was not considered glamorous, but when I was brought up in the 60s, we were a family of four, a fairly large family, four kids. We were 6 or 7 at the table all the time, and the routine was you had your potatoes and meat main meal, and you had some sort of dessert, and if you were still hungry, there's a jar of syrup and there's a pile of bread. Eat till you were full. So there was always lots of syrup around. It was always just a staple, basic food from the farmland that was not, in the early days, not considered a luxury, but a basic necessity. Now it's become more of a luxury item, and I think back to my childhood when we were working on the farm. We had 200 or 300 trees, and up at the back of the farm where I used to live, and we'd go set up and do this. My mom had a garden in the summertime, and we'd make sugar in the winter. We raised our own beef and butchered it ourselves. Very much a self-sustained country farm family. How much we got, Dale? Quite a bit. So as you can see, we pulled the taps. The season is finished. Once it gets warm enough that the buds start to come out, the sap starts to get milky, and it makes poor quality syrup. And there's a few of the taps where we pulled are still dripping a little bit on the trees and causing a little bit of dampness, but most of them are dried up, so the season's over. I wanted to point out how, especially maple syrup, is one of those, like many other crops, you have to be ready to go when the season is, when God provides the weather, when the transition from the snowy winter here in Canada up to the warmer summer we have is when that happens.